Okay, if I can have everyone's attention, I would like to start this morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Dali Museum. Let's see, there we go. Make sure you can hear it. Welcome to the Dali Museum for this Wednesday Coffee with a Curator. And as I'm sure many of you know, this is an event that we do on the first Wednesday of every month. We're happy to have so many people here this morning, and it's a program where we invite one of our staff members to give a presentation related to Dali and a particular topic or theme. Next month, we're going to have, I believe, Dr. William Jeffett, who's going to be talking about the new exhibition that just opened in the Raymond James Room, The Royal Inheritance, which, if you haven't seen it, you have a wonderful opportunity today to see in the first week a selection of 12 pieces that have been sent to us from the Reina Sofia Museum in relation to the Pompidou retrospective that's going to be opening in November in Paris. So that's what's going to be the topic for next month. And then the month after that, I'm going to do a reprise of a talk I did, I believe at Mosey last year, on Dali and Leonardo da Vinci. So a couple interesting things coming up. But today we're gathered here, and we want to thank Cafe Gala for providing the refreshments for this morning. But we are here this morning to hear about a very interesting refreshment-oriented talk, which deals with Dali and spoons. So with that, I'd like to invite Vickie Brunner, our Family Programs Coordinator, to come up and share with us her knowledge of Dali and spoons. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here today. Right up front, I would like to thank Jim Universal, Joan Kropp, Tori King, Peter Tush, Janice Embry, and Carol Butler for their assistance with me on the research for this topic. I think I probably researched about 30 books for this topic today. And I would like to warn you that there are some probably X-rated verbal parts that go with the talk. The images on the screen will be just fine. As many of you know, sometimes I choose a topic that's a little out of the ordinary, and Dali and his spoons appear in many of his paintings, illustrations, and sculptures, but information about Dali and spoons is rather sparse. Luckily, I'm not really too afraid of hard work, and I had to do a lot of digging in hopes of presenting anything that was going to be revealing or that would send you home with something to reflect on. This is the Dali Cutlery. We had this in a exhibit in 2009 called Dali and Gems, and when I began to think about spoons that Dali used in his work, there were a lot of origins and relationships that came to mind. Before I change it off of this slide, I would like to just show you that these look similar to mollusk shells or possibly flowers, and the tusks on that fork there are actually genuine ivory. These are very beautiful. So I was considering things like our everyday use of spoons and how it related to Dali's use of spoons. The spoon as a surrealist object, stretched or exaggerated spoons, the ethics of hard and soft, the relationship of spoons resting in glasses, and the psychoanalysis of spoon imagery related to Dali and his obsessions and hang-ups. I actually had no idea how much information I might find, but it did seem like it was going to be an interesting topic. So today we're going to look at it together. So after the breast or the bottle, the spoon is the first utensil that we see our parents feed us with, and it's the first utensil that we use when we feed ourselves. So it can be considered the safest of utensils and probably recognized as an original form of security for a young child. Here we have The Sick Child. This is a painting from our collection done in 1921. It's a watercolor gouache, and we see little Dali with his kerchief around his neck, more than likely laden with castor oil, maybe with oil of spearmint or something of the like. And we see the medicine bottle on the table there, and little Dali is reposing there with, I think, a most angelic smile on his face. Some people say he looks a little sinister, but you know, he loved being sick because when he was sick, he was the center of attention. And his safe and healthy maturation, so he could carry on the Dali family bloodline, was of utmost importance. So next to the bottle on the table, we see the spoon, the utensil of choice which delivers the medicine that promises a healthy recovery. Pretty straightforward. But take note of those spindly fingers, those exaggerated fingers. Even at this very early age, Dali was already exhibiting signs of his personal style. The long, spindly fingers in this work are evidence of Dali's initial attempt to evoke alienation by declaring his identity as other, different, removed from society, even before he'd ever read Freud. And Peter Tush notes this is one of the first examples of Dali's attempt to create a self-image that's exotic, strange, fascinating, and begging for deeper scrutiny. Here we see more extensions. Stilt-legged elephants and horses appear in The Temptation of St. Anthony. We see Lenin's extended buttocks here in The Enigma of William Tell. We see the Grasshopper Child with a deformed head and a long stretched-out table. And we see Tristan and Isolde right here. He has extended fingers on his hands and a wheelbarrow protruding out of his back. Stretched and exaggerated body parts and phalluses, as well as spoons, became a regular feature of many of Dali's later paintings. And notice that these are mostly items that one holds or the apparatus with which one grips. In the interpretation of dreams, Freud elaborated on well-known Freudian phallic symbols in dreams. He said, all elongated objects such as sticks, tree trunks, and umbrellas may stand for the male organ, as well as long, sharp weapons such as knives, daggers, and pikes. Receptive objects such as boxes, cases, chests, cupboards, and ovens represent the vagina or the uterus. And also hollow objects, ships and vessels of all kinds, step ladders or staircases, walking up or down them, are representatives of the sexual act. Dali did occasionally use knives and forks in his work, but the spoon is much more prolific. Here we have the book Transforming Itself into a Nude Woman from 1940. You see what looks to be a woman's body or possibly a loaf of bread that's being sliced by a knife. And then in Autumn Cannibalism, down in the lower right-hand corner, we have this, we see the effects of the atrocities of civil war in Spain and how that affected Dali's thoughts and his inspiration. A nation consuming itself. Dali said, nothing is closer to an embrace than a death grapple. This is Piero and the Guitar from 1920. It's another fairly early work, and it's done in the Cubist style. Dali's uncle was a bookseller in Barcelona, and he would send little Dali and adolescent Dali books and magazines about the latest art trends. So he kept Dali up on what was going on in the art world, and as a result, Dali experimented with many different styles. Picasso was some 20 years older than Dali, and he was from the same region of Spain, but he was a great influence on Dali. So here we see the toy tin plates right there that are reminiscent of the sound holes in the guitar, and the spoon right there resembles the tuning pegs. If the spoon is a repository of sustenance and we turn it upside down in our mouth, then the rigid spoon seems to mirror the shape of our soft tongue. And that brings me to the subject of Dali's obsession with the hard and soft. This is the surrealist object Gauge of Instantaneous Memory from 1932. Spoon imagery of this nature appears in several of Dali's paintings in 1932, along with during the time that the artist was exploring the morphological aesthetics of the hard and soft through an elaborate symbolism involving fried eggs, snails, shellfish, and other foods. So the hard spoon holds the soft foods, and in this case, it's fried eggs. What looks like a loaf of bread at one end is teetering on the edge there and morphs into the image of a spoon protruding from a split which opens like a seed pod to reveal 2 fried eggs. This work relates to Dali's ongoing investigations into the themes of edible beauty and ingestion. The spoon then becomes an object of symbolic significance. And here's a great one. This is Les Dinners de Gala. It was done in 1977, and it's one in a suite of paintings. But what I'd like you to notice about it is that down at the bottom of this, Dali does, a lot of times when he signs paintings, he does his own personal little illustration down there as well as his signature, and you might notice that that's the spoon, once again. Catalonians are reputed to believe only in their existence of things that they can eat, hear, feel, smell, or see. Dali insisted that the aesthetic well-being of the mind could only come from the body's health, from touching, eating, and chewing. An orgiastic sense of food is present throughout Dali's work, and where there is food, it follows that there must be utensils. Dali said, "Beauty will always be edible, or there will be no such thing as beauty." He also said, "The fact that I myself, at the moment of my painting, do not understand my own pictures does not mean that these pictures have no meaning." And who better to interpret them than Sigmund Freud? Freud said the actual words a patient uses to recount a dream hold the key to the dream's significance. As Freud explains in his essay on fetishism in 1927, his work with a number of men whose object choice was dominated by a fetish continually led him back to the same issue. In every instance, the meaning and the purpose of the fetish turned out in analysis to be the same. It revealed itself so naturally and seemed to me so compelling that I'm prepared to expect the same solution in all cases of fetishism. When now I announce that the fetish is a substitute for the phallus, I shall certainly create disappointment. So I hasten to add that it's not a substitute for any phallus, any chance phallus. To put it more plainly, the fetish is a substitute for the woman's, the mother's phallus that the little boy once believed in and, for reasons familiar to us, does not want to give up. Freud's pupil, Carl Gustav Jung, said, "When we attempt to understand symbols, we're not only confronted with the symbol itself, but we're brought up against the wholeness of the symbol-producing individual. Their education, their cultural background, their vital life problems, their imagination, their intuition are all vital to our understanding of why they've chosen this preferred image." Dali's mother was his favorite parent. She died when he was 16. Dali was an extremely articulate person. He was well-read, he was intelligent, and quite intuitive. He also had a few sexual obsessions and hang-ups. Jung also said, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct, acting from the inner necessity. The creative mind plays with the objects it loves." Well, Dali had a love-hate relationship with his penis and the spoon. With its long, straight shaft and bulbous bowl, the spoon mirrors the shape of that object in an exaggerated way. Freud and Jung later split on their theories of concerning dreams. Here we have the meeting of the illusion and the arrested moment, fried eggs presented in a spoon. That's on the left. And then on the right, we have Agnostic Symbol from 1932. So the one on the left, we come across a painting with the elongated spoon again, and this time, again, serving up eggs. The other, a vastly elongated Louis XV spoon, stretching like elastic or chewing gum, which emerges from a painting within the painting. And I'm sorry, you really can't see it. We had to get a better image that was clearer, and it cut off the painting within the painting, but it's right up there in the upper right-hand corner. And it snakes around this rock or a loaf of bread or whatever that might be there in the center of the painting, and it's actually headed nowhere, to present a gold pocket watch. In its psychological interpretation, the snake is a phallic symbol linked with fertility. Because it lives close to the earth, it can be linked to the nurturing earth or the unknown perils of the underworld. So I ask you, how could anyone with a fetish think of a snake burrowing into a hole and not think of sex? In the Comedy of Errors, William Shakespeare said, "He must have a long spoon that must eat with the devil." The reference to blasphemers in the painting's title, Agnostic Symbol, which is this one over here, reflects the surrealist group's antipathy towards organized religion, which Dali appears to have shared at that time. Of course, by the 1940s, he had renounced that and taken a different stance in favor of the classic period belief that science was proving the existence of God. And this is Suez. This is a work from our collection now known as Suez. It was originally titled Agnostic Landscape, and it shares those same warm browns and sickly greens used in the agnostic symbol. In this painting, a spoon, like the obviously phallic symbol, stretches like a tightrope across that dry canal or trench. It's almost attached to a handle-like appendage that seems to be growing out of the wall. So here's the spoon stretching across, and there's that image there. We tried to get as sharp as an image as we could so that you could see the details better. The cypress trees up at the very top, and the fishermen, possibly grave diggers, and the mummified-looking figure up there, all of them with rocks on their heads, hint that this is a painting about death. Laurie Benson's entry in Liquid Desire catalog references the tightly strung and clearly phallic elasticized spoon is laden with elemental significance for Dali. She references Robert S. Lubar by saying, "A bisexual meaning can be read into this image as the bowl of the spoon is tantalizingly close to a thorn-like erect protrusion extending from a supple and curvaceous tree root that references both male and female genitalia." For Dali, the associations between lust, desire, sexual fantasy, and mortality are recurring themes in much of his Freudian influenced art and writings in the 1930s. And as Peter Tush explains it, the Freudian defined adult fear of lack of performance is a nuance that Dali brings to us. The spoon is too long for its own good. It defies the ability of what one should be physically able to do, just as Dali's impossibly heavy-bodied animals on stilt legs seem to defy the laws of gravity. So we initially see the more straightforward, fearful symbolism of impotence, the stretched phallus that's so thin it's about ready to crack or break. And this can be related to the deep-seated male desire to be taller or longer than others. We also see in the center that a painting is half submerged in a bucket of water at the bottom of the trench, and it references two pyramids of Giza, which is the resting place of the pharaohs. And the cypress trees, another motif of death, could reflect the influence of Swiss symbolist painter Arnold Böcklin. Dali mentions Böcklin several times in The Secret Life of Salvador Dali, which was his autobiography, and he was undoubtedly influenced by him. What I also notice here, as another possible interpretation, is the spoon, as a symbol of sustenance and security, bridges the chasm or tomb of death. Dali says of death, "I follow death, but it fascinates me by its eternity. I believe that I love it despite my fear, but I can't picture myself dying." He continues, "Death is the thing that frightens me the most, and resurrection of the flesh, that great Spanish theme, the one most difficult for me to accept from the viewpoint of life." In the Dictionary of Symbols, J.E. Surlott from our museum research library, I found that he referenced string, cord, or rope are forms of binding and can symbolize an emblem of cohesion. So the spoon could function as a cord or thread binding together all things in existence at this moment. In this particular case, I think it could act as a bridge between two separate worlds, a transition from one state to another. And of course, it's highly debatable, but the spoon bridge or tightrope spoon in this case could symbolize the link between what can be perceived and what is beyond perception. There are a great many cultures where the bridge symbolizes the link from one state to another, and this is a very ambiguous painting with a lot of theories out there as far as explanations of its meaning. This piece here is from our collection, and it's titled Surrealist Object Functioning Symbolically. It was done in 1931, and the other one is the Fur Teacup by Murray Oppenheim. Dali's Melting Clocks and Murray Oppenheim's Surrealist Object are a couple of the most well-known images of the Surrealist movement. Oppenheim's object was inspired by a conversation between herself, Pablo Picasso, and Dora Maar in a Paris cafe. And shortly after that, Oppenheim was invited to participate in the first Surrealist exhibition dedicated to objects. And she submitted the teacup, the saucer, and the spoon covered with the fur of a Chinese gazelle. In an article from the Liquid Desire catalog, William Jeffett notes that Dali's considerable contribution to surrealism was based on two theoretical innovations, the paranoid critical method and the surrealist object. So you see here in his work the spoon right there, and it's designed to stir the contents that's inside the shoe. A quote by Freud: "The new structure may seem entirely absurd or may strike us as an imaginative success according to the ingenuity with which it's put together. It's the ingenuity with which Dali put these images together that allows him to claim the paranoid critical method as his own creation, his genius." Now, this painting doesn't have any spoons in it. It's called the font. But I enlarged the dolman from the lower right-hand portion of the painting so that you could see, because there are screws and keys in there. And Carl Jung discussed referencing images such as a key in a lock, which was another favorite motif of Dali's, a battering ram, or a stick, all of which can be classified as sexual symbols. And Jung went on to say, but the fact that the unconscious for its own purpose has chosen one of these specific images, the key, the stick, or in our case, the spoon, is also of major significance. The real trick is to understand why the key or the spoon has been preferred. And sometimes this might even lead someone to discover that it's not the sexual act at all that's represented, but some quite different psychological point that objects may happen to possess in reality. William Jeffett says, the paranoid critical method proclaimed the supremacy of thought and the rejection of banal constructions of reality. It was expressed primarily in painting through the double image. This one is one that most people don't know about. It's called surrealist architecture. And Peter Tush further elaborates by saying that it's the free association of things that don't behave properly. And these spoons are not behaving properly. So the surrealist object identifies with the dream object. Here we see two spoons aggressively thrust into the concavities of an elaborate modern-style structure with clearly feminine attributes. Now here's a real pair of ladies. I'm afraid one eclipses the other, but I'm really not sure which. And there's the man of the hour. He's got holding his spoon-handled cane, and I think maybe the guy next to him is stealing the moment at this point. This is two different, rather remote images. One is from Pantagruel, the other one is from the Les Champs de Maldoror, and these were both in exhibits that we had in our Huff galleries this year. I don't know if you can see it, but the spoon comes right out of the frog's mouth right there, and the eyelids are spoons up here. So, of course, you knew you weren't going to get out of here today without hearing the story of how Dali creates dreamlike works by holding a key. He wrote about it in the 50 Secrets of Magic Craftsmanship, and he would tell the story about how when he would get ready for a siesta, he would hold a key in his hand, and then he would put a tin plate down on the floor. And as he would fall asleep, his hand would relax and he would drop the key and it would clatter into the tin plate, and that would wake him up, and at that very moment he would remember his surreal dreams. Now, if anybody can remember reading a similar story and Dolly using a spoon instead of a key, because there are a number of us who think we remember that story, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So if you know where that is, I would love to hear about it. This one, you can see, has some heavy damage to it. I was actually really surprised to find it in the Taschen Black and Gold book. But it's called Cannibalism of Objects. And here we see Dolly's interpretation of a meat glass, a meat aeroplane, a meat spoon, a meat watch, and a meat head. Can you see those objects? Okay. Now, I put all these on the same slide together because around 1936, Dolly begins to use the motif of spoons in glasses, and all the glasses look remarkably the same. They are believed to have been inspired by those from the casino in Cadaqués. So the motif of the spoon in a glass, of course, conveys a sexual allegory. And if you take a look at morphological echo, which is this one down here in the corner, and you watch this series of images right here, the spoon in a glass echoes a walking woman, which then echoes a stone tower, and so on. So it builds from the bottom to the top. And this is an image of a spoon lady from The Secret Life of Salvador Dali, one of his autobiographies. Spooning is a kind of horizontal body hug of modern days, two bodies curling up so they both fit perfectly into each other's nooks and comfy places, just like two spoons in a drawer. And I thought this was a cute one. It's the image of a spoon, an oil bottle with spoon hands. And it's a great classic composite structure. There's a quote from Freud that says, "Composite structures in dreams can be formed in a great variety of ways. A more painstaking technique combines the features of both objects into a new image, and in doing so makes clever use of any similarities that the two objects may happen to possess in reality." And this is Dolly's Mannequin from the 1938 surrealist exhibition at the Galerie Beaux Arts in Paris. The Dolly Mannequin was covered with spoons, and I think there's a key right there above her navel, right? Right? Can you see it right there? And Schiaparelli did the face mask for that piece. Here's another strange one. The one on the right is called The Thinking Machine and was done in 1941. Later in 1960, Dolly revisited the process, producing the chair with vulture wings, which is, of course, the one on the left. And the popular idiom, "born with a silver spoon in your mouth," conveys that someone was born into a privileged life. Dali did a lot of off-the-wall, even scandalous portraits of the rich and famous, and I wondered if he'd ever done anyone with a silver spoon in their mouth. This is so close that it leaves little to the imagination. The spoon isn't in his mouth, but there sits Mr. Feigin under a pyramid and surrounded by spoons. And just look at the way Dali captured the silk sheen on his suit. I think it's absolutely remarkable. And Dali also did a very unflattering portrait of Mildred Fagan in 1960. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this image because we talked about it last month at last month's Coffee with a Curator when Bethany Mead did it. But Dali met Harpo Marx in Hollywood, and he was so taken with Harpo that he sent him a harp strung with barbed wire. And it was equipped with teaspoons and forks for tuning pegs. And Harpo responded by sending back a photo of himself gleefully playing the harp with bandaged fingers. This is the bust of Dante. It was a 1964 collaboration between Dali and Baroness Christine Ferrani. It's bronze and green patina, and the silver spoons that compose the crown are plated with 18-karat gold. And there's a circuit board right down here at the bottom as the base of the piece. This sculpture is in the Teatro Masayo, which is the other largest Dali museum in the world. And I have 3 different photos. Unfortunately, they're not really good photos, but this one I found late into the talk, and this is probably the best one because it sort of snakes down from the ceiling in a chandelier sort of effect. Unfortunately, the numbers are right over the face of the sculpture, but here it is in enlargement anyway. So the chain is sort of snaking down, and it's covered with spoons. Now, this is the portrait of Picasso. Dali's very first trip to Paris as an adolescent was with chaperones, and he proudly visited Picasso and told him that he'd come to visit him before he went to the Louvre. And later, Picasso loaned Dali and Gala monies for their first trip to the United States. Some of Dali's early works reflect Picasso's influence, and his admiration for Picasso began to fade in the later years. So this painting reflects Dali's feelings at that time about his fellow countrymen. Picasso's renown is affirmed by the bust that the pedestal that the bust is mounted on, but Dali mocks Picasso's pursuit of his intellectualism and ugliness in his paintings. Once again, we see the elongated, elasticized spoon, this time coming out of Picasso's mouth, holding in its bowl a tiny lute. Elasticity implies stretching to the outside limits of your capability, which can be both stimulating and rewarding. When you stretch yourself outside your comfort zone, you can further develop that which is deficient in your own personality. The lute, or mandolin, as well as the jasmine and the carnation, reflect Picasso's Andalusian and Malagan origins. And at the height of the Cold War, Picasso had become a communist, and Dali had become violently anti-communist. Dali proclaimed that Picasso had destroyed 20th century art, and Dali believed he was the savior of modern art. Now, this is Uri Geller. He lives in Great Britain, and he's one of the world's most celebrated and investigated paranormalists. This is his custom-built 1976 Cadillac, and it's encrusted with over 5,000 pieces of contorted cutlery and bent spoons, some of which Uri Geller bent from the power of his own mind. Dali met Uri Geller in Barcelona for a couple of days, and Geller bent a gold fork in Dali's hand. And after that happened, Dali took off into another room and locked himself in there for hours, it said in the story. When Dali emerged, he was holding a rock crystal sphere, which was the gift to Geller and which sits proudly on the hood of Geller's Cadillac. So there it is, right? I don't know if you can see it up there or not. Right there. And I found these newspaper clippings towards the end of my research on this project. This is the Dali retrospective from 1979 at the Pompidou in Paris. And I hope you'll allow me to read a couple of these things. And gosh, I hope I can see them in this light. An enormous spoon, 99 feet long and weighing 3,520 pounds, gets its finishing touches before being put on display in the entrance hall of the Georges Pompidou Cultural Center in Paris. It was designed by Salvador Dali as a part of a fountain at the center. And if you look carefully, you might be able to see, is this the one? Yeah, I can show you too. Here's the tip of the spoon is right there. Oh, wait, right there. And this is the center section of the spoon, which has the, just take note of that little curvature there, okay? Everything was ready. The outside of the Pompidou Center, popularly known as the Beaubourg, and itself the most surrealistic of all galleries, was draped with two 30-foot-long men's shirts, seemingly put out to dry. In the main hall, the 120-foot-long absinthe drinker's spoon and the 15-foot-long salamis were hung with care. And the benefit dinner composed with a rice course shaped like a woman's breast, was ready to be served. Then the museum employees went on strike. Can you imagine what it must have been like to put this thing together? It must have been harrowing. For money and promotions. And the opening had to be canceled. The artist appeared at the museum door, posed for photographers in his leopard skin coat, and then promptly flew off to New York. The strikers held out over the weekend, then went back to work Wednesday, the day the show was supposed to open for the public. 168 paintings, 300 drawings, 2 films, some 2,000 documents covering the artist's entire career and themes of objects of art, among them the spoon, the salamis, and several thinking machines. We saw that one up there, including a wheelbarrow with shoes nailed to the wheel, which holds nothing but a giant egg. The spoon and the salamis hung overhead. 12 inkwells embedded in a 5-foot-long loaf of French bread are distributed along the walkway. They were showing continuous showings of Un Chien Andalou and also of a film that Dali collaborated on with Spanish director Jose Montes Bacur, I believe that is. Let's see what. Oh, here was one other thing I wanted to read. It was a quote from Dali. He said, or a quote from this newspaper. It came out in the New York Times on Tuesday, January 1st of 1980. Again, the artist himself summed up his life best when writing years ago in The Journal of a Genius, which I think was actually called The Diary of a Genius. He said, "Each morning when I awake, I experience again a supreme pleasure, that of being Salvador Dali." Now, for those of you that are headed to Paris to see the upcoming Pompidou exhibit, I will be interested to see how they are going to top this. And I just wanted to show these other 2 pictures because this one was evidently taken at night. It took me a while to figure out why it was so black. But you can see here the corner of the Boberg, and this is the night sky, and this is the gigantic spoon. They're hauling it in. You can see the tractor trailer there, and this is the flatbed that they're hauling it in on. So they must have brought it in at night. And this is a very poor image, but it was the only one I could find. It's a photo link image, and they put that part in the middle there to claim it as theirs. But anyway, it's an image of Dali as he was there at the Pompidou exhibit. And then in 1988, Claes Oldenburg and Kusi van Bruggen came out with the Spoon, Bridge, and Cherry. And it's 17 yards in length, and it's in the sculpture garden at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Claes Oldenburg is an American sculptor. He's best known for his public art installations, typically featuring very large replicas of everyday objects, but he also works in soft sculpture with the same thing, versions of everyday objects. And many of his works were collaborated on with his wife, Kusi, who died in 2009, and they had been married for 32 years. Oldenburg still lives and works in New York City. In 1941, the Art Digest wrote about Dali, saying, "Dali's secret consists of juxtaposing the most traditional of objects in the most incongruous ways." And according to Robert Descharnes, Dali's gags were endless and infinitely various, and they mattered more to him than anything else. Dali said, "Don't be afraid of perfection. You'll never attain it." And believe it or not, I found this image online, and I'm sorry that there's a tourist there in the middle of it, but actually it's it's the best image that I could find of this spoon. This is the same spoon from the Pompidou exhibit, and they brought it over to Figueres and installed it as an art installation on December 31st of 2004. And the reason why I pointed out to you that little jog when we looked at it in the other picture is because you can see it right there again going around the cypress tree. Now, and you know, these reports are all differing, but they describe it now as a 38-meter-long spoon that snakes around the cypress tree, just like the agnostic symbol that we looked at from 1932. So in closing, we see that Dali has served himself up to the public, on a silver spoon, of course, as a delectably edible treat, and I'm sure that Dalinian art has and will continue to offer surreal sustenance and inspiration down through the ages.